so welcome everybody. This first session that I'm going to present is in 3 parts, and it's to look at the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals. There's quite a lot of information, so don't worry about that. You'll get the recordings later. Just view it all in a reflective mode, and put any highlights in the chat box or clarifications that you might need when we give you an opportunity. So the first part, we're going to show you a video that gives you an overall presentation of what the SDGs are about. So just wait as I share my screen with you.
What are the SDGs?
Can you hear that?
In 2015,
yes.
world leaders from 193 countries agreed the Sustainable Development Goals, or SDGs. The world's new action plan for the next 15 years to eradicate extreme poverty and hunger, fight inequality, tackle climate change and achieve sustainable development for all. The SDGs follow the Millennium Development Goals, or MDGs, agreed in 2000 in a global coordinated attempt to tackle development issues. As a result, the number of people living in extreme poverty has declined by more than half compared to 1990. More girls and boys go to primary school than ever before, and far more people have access to water and essential medicines. But progress of the MDGs has been mixed. Today, over 800 million people still live in extreme poverty. They are also most vulnerable to the increasing impacts from climate change and environmental degradation. Years of hard-won progress fighting poverty could easily be wiped out by even small conflicts, economic crises, or natural disasters. Also, sub-Saharan Africa and Southern Asia consistently achieved less progress than other regions. The MDGs measured success on national averages, often missing what happened with marginalised groups like people with disabilities, indigenous groups, rural communities and women. The international community recognised the new challenges and that human prosperity must go hand in hand with protecting the planet. After a 3-year participatory process, world leaders finally adopted 17 Sustainable Development Goals. So what are these goals for? They are end poverty for all, freedom from hunger, health and well-being, quality of education, gender equality, clean water and sanitation, sustainable energy for all, decent work and economic development, innovation and resilient infrastructure, reducing inequalities, sustainable cities and communities, sustainable consumption and production, action on climate change, healthy oceans, sustainable ecosystems, peace and justice, global partnerships. There are 4 underlying principles that come with the SDGs and that are transformational in the way we work on development in the future. Firstly, the SDGs are universal. They apply to every country, rich and poor, North and South, developed and developing. They recognise that global challenges like tackling climate change and changing models of development require global solutions. Domestic policies that look at these issues in one country will have an impact on other parts of the world, so we need to coordinate. Secondly, they integrate all dimensions of sustainability: economic development, social progress, and environmental protection. For example, they tell us to grow enough food for all without destroying the soil or overusing water, to develop our economies without increasing inequality, or to produce enough electricity for all without pumping more CO2 into the atmosphere. This is similar to what Pope Francis says in his encyclical. We are faced not with two separate crises, one environmental and the other social, but rather with one complex crisis, which is both social and environmental. Strategies for a solution demand an integrated approach to combating poverty, restoring dignity to the excluded, and at the same time protecting nature. The SDGs tell us we should leave no one behind. Governments have agreed no goal should be met unless it is met for everyone, including those in society most vulnerable and hardest to reach. So education must reach Indigenous communities, jobs created for women and men, quality healthcare available for all rural communities, and water and sanitation facilities accessible for people living with disabilities. Tackling exclusion is the key to tackling inequality. And finally, the SDGs require the participation of all. The process to agree the SDGs took years and included national dialogues, consultations with civil society groups, the private sector and academia, and ended with negotiations between all governments at the UN. There's a strong sense of ownership of these goals. The result is ambitious, but it reflects what the world wants. Today, the implementation of the SDGs requires ongoing participation at a national and local level. All stakeholders have a role towards their successful achievement. Taken together with the Paris Climate Change Agreement and the Pope's encyclical Laudato Si', the SDGs provide a new framework for approaching sustainable development.
So thank you, everyone, and thank you, Tino, for coming to the rescue. So that gives you a broad overview of what the SDGs are about and how they came about, the agreement of all the countries and ratified at the United Nations or agreed to at the United Nations. Now, you're going to get a minute or so just to reflect on that and put any highlight or clarification you want in the chat box. Then we're going to look at the SDGs in more detail. So thank you.
Thank you, everybody, for your comments, and back to you now, Terry.
Thank you, everyone. Now we're going to look at the SDGs in a bit more detail. Please don't try and take down all the information. Just listen to it in a reflective mode to see what is brought up on the screen. Tino and I will be sharing what is on the screen. So just listen to it in a reflective mode and note anything that comes to your mind. That's all. So I'm going to share my screen again. Again, Tino, it's not coming up. I don't know why. Right, I'm okay, thank you. Right, so the first slide gives you a picture of all the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. Tino, can you see that?
Yes, perfectly, and we can hear you also.
Right, thank you. So now we'll go through them one by one, and again, just in a reflective mode, see what is highlighting and what is important for you. So Sustainable Development Goal number 1, or SDG number 1, no poverty. 1 in 5 persons in developing world lives on less than $1.25 per day.
795 million people in the world are malnourished.
50% of children living in extreme poverty are under 18 years old. SDG number 2, zero hunger. 3.5 million children die every year due to poor nutrition.
1 out of 9 persons in the world goes to bed hungry.
Poor nutrition causes 45% of the child deaths under 5 years old. SDG number 3, good health and well-being. 35 million people live with HIV, and about 240,000 children were newly infected by the end of 2013.
6 million children die before they reach 5 years old.
The maternal death rate in developing countries is 14 times higher than the global average. Number 4, quality education. 103 million young persons worldwide lack basic literacy skills.
And 60% of those are women.
Just 1 year extra in school can increase a woman's earnings by up to 20%. Number 5, gender equality. Women are 43 to 50% of the labor force in agriculture, but get only 5% of advisory services.
30% of women with partners have suffered physical or sexual abuse.
Only 22% of parliamentarians across the world are women. Number 6, clean water and sanitation. 663 million people, 1 in 10, lack access to safe water.
Water scarcity affects more than 40% of global population.
1/3 of all healthcare facilities in the developing world lack a safe water source. Number 7, affordable and clean energy. Midtown Manhattan uses more energy than the whole of Kenya.
291 million children attend primary schools without electricity.
Energy contributes 60% of total global greenhouse gas emissions. Number 8, decent work and economic growth. 202 million people are now unemployed around the world.
By 2019, that was 3 years ago, more than 212 million people were projected to be out of work.
Nearly 2.2 billion people live below the $2 poverty line. Number 9, industry, innovation, and infrastructure. 828 million people live in slums today, and the number keeps rising.
2.5 billion people worldwide lack access to basic sanitation.
Infrastructure constraints reduce productivity to 40% in the developing world. Number 10, reduce inequalities. The poorest 10% earn only between 2 and 7% of the total global income.
Children in the poorest 20% of the populations are 3 times more likely to die before their birthday.
90% of those who die in road accidents are from developing countries. Number 11, sustainable cities and communities. Cities occupy 3% of the land, but account for 60 to 80% of the energy consumption and 75% of carbon emissions.
90% of road deaths happen in developing countries, many in the urban areas.
828 million people live in slums today. Number 12, responsible consumption and production. 1/3 of all food produced worth around 1/3 of all food produced worth around $1 trillion is wasted every year.
Mankind is polluting water faster than nature can purify and recycle it in rivers and lakes.
Only 0.5%, that is 1/40th of the world's water, is available to drink. Number 13, climate action. For each 1 degree temperature increase, grain yields decline by about 5%.
Average sea level rise is predicted as 24 to 30 centimeters by 2065 and 40 to 63 centimeters by 2100.
Global emissions of carbon dioxide have increased by almost 50% since 1990. Number 14, life below water. 40% of the world's oceans are heavily affected by human activities.
Over 1 million seabirds are killed by ocean pollution each year.
100,000 sea mammals are killed in the ocean by pollution each year. Number 15, life on land. 80% of animal, plants, and insects live in forests.
12 million hectares of land lost each year due to drought and desertification.
2.6 billion people depend on agriculture, but 52% of agricultural land is affected by soil degradation. Peace, justice, and strong institutions. Corruption, bribery, and tax evasion cost developing countries $1.26 trillion every year, leaving populations in poverty.
Armed conflict and other forms of violence undermine human well-being.
Children leaving primary school reached 50% in conflict-affected countries. And finally, number 17, partnerships for the goals. Not all developed countries meet their obligations to provide agreed levels of aid.
Unfair trade restrictions and distortions in global agriculture markets.
Inadequate access to and capacity in banking, science, and technology. So that gave you a very quick, broad overview of the challenges that are laid out in the Sustainable Development Goals. You're now going to get another 90 seconds. Thank you, Tino. Now we're going to just wrap up this section with just a short thing of what, a little more detail of what the Sustainable Development Goals hope to achieve. So I'm going to try and share my screen again. Can you see that, Tino?
Perfectly.
Are you hearing me?
Yes.
Thank you. Oh, sorry, Tino, I have to go out of this again now. I've done something wrong. Can you see that, Tino?
Yes.
Okay. What do the Sustainable Development Goals hope to achieve? So firstly, they are very unique compared to the MDGs, the Millennium Development Goals. Number one, they are universal. The SDGs are truly universal framework and will be applicable to all countries. They are transformative. They are an agenda for people, planet, prosperity, peace, and partnership, the 5 Ps. And it provides a transformative vision for people and is planet-centered, human rights-based, gender-sensitive, and focused on sustainable development that goes far beyond the narrow vision of the MDGs. So universal and transformative. Thirdly, they are comprehensive. The SDGs cover issues related to all human rights, including economic, civil, cultural, political, social rights, and the right to development. And fourthly, they are inclusive. The SDGs strive to leave no one behind, envisaging a world of universal respect for equality and non-discrimination between and within countries, including gender equality, by reaffirming the responsibilities of all states to respect, protect, and promote human rights without distinction of any kind as to race, color, sex, language, religion, political or other options, national and social origin, property, birth, disability, or other status. So they are how they are four qualities that make them unique. Now we're going to move on to a bit more about what they hope to achieve, what each goal is, what the goal of each goal is. Firstly, they express an ambitious, specific, and actionable commitment. And they all start with a verb or action, like to end poverty. They are concise and easy to communicate. They are aspirational, something to work towards. They are transformational. They are limited in number. And they are global in nature and universally applicable to all countries, while taking into account different national realities, capacities, and levels of development, and respecting national policies and priorities. So that's kind of a broad overview of what they hope to achieve. Now, each goal has a number of targets, and the targets are specific, measurable objectives whose attainment will contribute in a major way to achieving one or more goals. It is an outcome that is attainable. And there is a link between the target and the goal. The targets speak to all relevant stakeholders. The targets are nationally relevant and adaptable. They are time-bound, and they are evidence and science-based. They are adjustable as science advances, and if countries choose to raise their level of ambition in achieving a goal. Now, each target has an indicator. And an indicator is a precise metric or measuring to assess if a target is being met. A precise measurement or metric to assess if a target is being met. And there may be more than one indicator associated with a particular target. So you have the goals, and you have, as we showed you before, the targets, and you have the indicators. Now let's just look at one goal and see how this is applicable. So we take SDG number 1, end poverty in all its forms everywhere. That's the goal. And for this, the UN has defined 7 targets and 14 indicators. 7 targets and 14 indicators. Now, we can't go through all those with you, but just for example, target 1.1. By 2030, eradicate extreme poverty for all people everywhere, currently measured as people living on less than $1.25 a day. So this is the target for 2030, time-bound, measurable. And an indicator for that is the proportion of the population below the international poverty line by sex, age, employment status, and geographical location, urban and renewal. What proportion of the population is below this poverty line? That will indicate whether the target is being met. Now, the international poverty line is defined as $1.9 per day. It has been updated from the previous poverty line of $1.25 to $1.9 per day in 2015. So there is a quick overview of the goal, the target, and the indicator, and that is applied throughout all the SDGs. So it's very, very comprehensive. So again, this is the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, and we're going to give you 2 minutes now in the chat just to put in what stays with you, any clarification or any question.